In this lesson, I'm going to introduce one more third-party library into our system. Admittedly, it's a bit gratuitous. I don't really need it per se, but this little addition is going to save me a lot of typing in the long run. So I'm going to add it now. Now, if you'll recall from the Application Architecture Fundamentals series that assuming we choose to use data transfer objects in our architecture to transfer data between the layers, then we're constantly going to be playing this little game of mapping data into and out of the data transfer objects. And so this takes the form of what you see currently in lines 34 and 35, where we are getting a contract DTO back from our contract repository, and we're creating a new instance of our contract, which is an object in our domain layer. And now we're going to take the properties from the DTO and set them into our domain class, our contract class. And so, admittedly, what you see here is barely a problem, okay? However, this is just the first of many potential mappings in our system since we're just getting started. And it only has two properties in this case. Imagine if contract had a dozen properties or 20 properties. It'll require a lot of mind-numbingly boring typing and a lot of potential for mistyping, a lot of just wasted time, and something that can be solved relatively easily. So to remedy this, we can utilize a third-party library called AutoMapper that in many cases will automatically map data between two classes. And if for some reason it can't just automatically map the two, then you can tell it, you can teach it how to match this property in this class to that property in that class, all right? So we're going to do what we did, and we're going to go to Tools, Library Package Manager, and then select Manage NuGet Packages for the solution. And we're going to type in AutoMapper, and we're going to click Install. And we're just going to add this for, well, we'll go ahead and add it to everything. Won't hurt anything at all. All right, and after it installs, then what we want to do is we're going to need to create a mapping. All right, and so this is where we're telling it map the properties of this class to the properties of that class. And this will be a fairly simple mapping. You can create more complex ones, and they have detailed instructions on their site. This is probably deserves another mini series, and we'll do that much later. I don't want to teach you how to use everything about AutoMapper right now, but we'll talk about some slightly more advanced cases in a mini series devoted to AutoMapper. But at any rate, let's go to our contract test. And here, I'm doing what I would call a composition root. I think I talked about this in the Application Architecture Fundamental series. This is where all the setup needs to happen. And so in a unit test project, we're going to do all of the setup in this initialize function that we created in the previous lesson. Ultimately, probably what we're going to do is create this same line of code, this mapping that AutoMapper will use in probably the user interface, or possibly the application facade. I'm going to defer that decision for now because we don't really need it. I just need to set up the mapping somewhere, and in a unit test project, when there's only a unit test and a domain class, putting it here in what I'm going to call the composition root. In fact, let me go ahead and just write this little note ahead of it. Initialize serves as the composition root, okay? And in the composition root, we're already setting up Fake It Easy. We're going to go AutoMapper dot mapper dot create map, and I'm going to say whenever you see a contract DTO, make sure you can map it to the contract. In fact, I need to make this like so. There we go. Without explaining much about how create map works, we're essentially giving it two types and telling it work with these, do your best. And then the create map function will go off and try to map the properties to each other, so that when we go back into our contract service class, we can now, let's get rid of these two lines of code, and instead all we need to do is in fact we can get rid of this as well. And now all we need to do is var contract equals automapper.mapper.map. I'm going to remind it which of the mappings that it should use. We can set up several, but we're going to remind it we want this mapping where we said map contract DTO to contract, and now we pass it in its input parameter what we want mapped. We want this contract DTO mapped out. And that line of code, let's go ahead and make some room for it here. That line of code will replace these 3 lines of code. Now, again, we're only really saving ourselves 2 lines of code here. We didn't have to really create these 2 lines of code. But what if it was 12 properties that we needed to map, or dozens of properties across several objects? This could save us a lot of time typing. And then imagine this across multiple layers as well. So at any rate, let's do this. Let's make sure that this little change didn't break anything in our app. And it looks like everything is still running successfully. So that's what we needed to do. Small change, big benefit for productivity going forward, especially since we're building this architectural spike. We want the rest of the developers on the team to benefit from this library and to reduce the chance of typing in the wrong property names or whatever the case might be, and the frustration that goes along with it. A little bit of setup, a lot of benefit long term. Okay, so we're going to continue on the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thank you.